how do you guard against injuries in the future, and how do you treat yourself as an athlete?
Well, I mean, that was an injury that occurred when I was really trying to establish myself as a player, and I was in my early 20s, and I was practicing on a cello that wasn't set up well. I was practicing in a dry room. I was going to competitions, and I had these cellists that I thought were just magnificent, and I wanted to sound like them, and I wasn't really being true to myself. And I think there were some things I was doing wrong, and maybe things that, if they're wrong and you were doing them wrong with great enthusiasm and not holding back, I think that was part of the problem. I do think warming up is crucially important. I also think you've got to have good musical choices. Don't try and be the fastest and the loudest. That's overrated virtues, if you ask me now. Probably 25 years ago, I didn't think that. And I think to have good musical choices and to be able to listen to your body and to understand that if something is hurting, it might just be a momentary thing, or if it doesn't stop hurting, maybe there's something that you're doing wrong. Or, of course, I hate the phrase "a bad workman blames his tools," because it's not always true. If you have a cello that's not set up well, and you're playing in 85%, 100% humidity, and the cello's not set up well, and you're fighting and you can't get the right sound, okay, you may not be doing everything right, but the cello, if it's not helping you, will certainly be a factor in you and your discomfort. So that's something you've got to be very practical. You know, we're dealing with an instrument, and the cello is in the mellow middle register. So we have to work hard to make up for that and to have a sound that's going to project in a big hall without killing ourselves. And I think that's very important. So to play and work with the acoustic, to have the idea of the cello and the natural resonance of the instrument, and to of course, sometimes you just have to give up and you think, this is a 2,000 seat hall, there's no way I can fill the entire room. So you have to think, well, I'm going to bring the audience in, and I'm going to try to create a range of colour and sound where they will project their ears, and I'm not going to be shouting and screaming, but they'll be sort of, I'll sort of invite them into what I'm doing, and that's also something that's important.
Yeah, and many times those are the most intriguing performances when when you ask the audience. I mean, in a way, you're trusting them to be there with you instead of begging them to be there.
That's right, exactly.
And I think it makes a huge difference, and audiences get a feel for that. They know when you're giving them something precious like that, like when you're willing to play pianissimo, that so many people aren't always willing to do, to kind of draw them in. It's incredibly captivating.
It's really interesting. There's a cellist colleague of mine from England called Stephen Islis, who I'm sure you've heard of, and he's the man that directs Prussia Cove. It's a very exclusive chamber music retreat in England, and I keep trying to go, but I can't because I'm always busy with the quartet. But he said there are two words that we don't allow here at Prussia Cove. One is career, and the other is projection. It's rather refreshing. So I think that's, and of course, everybody wants to play loud these days. They think that, you think if you loud is going to give you a career and you've got to be heard, and I think it's a mistake. And in our teaching, we try to cultivate different kind of values. I mean, of course, you've got to be heard. You've got to be able to project your sound according to the hall. But nuance and variety and intimacy are just as important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when students are learning, for instance, when they're going to maybe university for the first time, so much of their repertoire can be concerto repertoire, and especially as a cellist, you're doing your best to be to project over an orchestra. So you get the ideal of you must be heard or you must play loud to be heard, and then that is very much contrary to the chamber music aspect, where you do want to draw people in, and so. It must be very challenging with students to give them both worlds, because in some ways you need to be able to do both. Although I think people probably don't have to struggle, for that outward virtuosity as much as they think they do.
I do agree, and you can play those magnificent. I've been very lucky this year. I played a concert with Peter Frankel and my colleague in the quartet, Martin, the first one. We played both Schubert trios in one night.
Oh, great.
A wonderful moment when, one of the scales in the E flat, Peter turned and said, I don't want to rush here, and I don't want this scale to be a virtuosic scale. It shouldn't sound like Liszt. This is a melodic scale. And you could have easily played that in a very brilliant kind of black and white way and played to the gallery, and it could have sounded very impressive. But actually, he thought it was musically much more appropriate to not play it like that, and of course not to baby it, but to think of it more as a melodic figure rather than as a empty virtuosity.
Well, and I can guess where you're talking about too, because all of those Schubert, especially in the E flat, all those scales are interesting morphed scales. They're not chromatic, they're not diatonic, and they're all interesting in their own way. And if you just flush through it, then it just is a virtuosic scale. But if you actually care for all those choices that Schubert made, then you're really honoring the music in that way.
Absolutely right, absolutely right. Yeah.
And one thing that you also talked about earlier in seeing the Vermeer Quartet, it was the Vermeer Quartet with Peter Frankel, right? And that you were amazed that they could collaborate and put together. Was it? Did you say they did the Dvorak Quintet?
They did the Brahms Quintet.
Right. That they could do that in a day. So I'm sure that you do many collaborations quickly in that way. And talk a little bit about that. And it's interesting because we'll be collaborating together. I'm the pianist that you'll be working
with the Schumann.
And the Schumann is such an incredible work. And I'm also very experienced in putting together things quickly. And it's amazing how you sort of draw into each other so quickly in that very first rehearsal time. And what is that like for the quartet, going from different collaborator to different collaborator?
I think it's very exciting because one possible challenge about quartet life is that very few people come through the door. You're in this tiny little community, 4 of you. You've got your managers and you've got students that change every semester. But basically, we are just alone with each other all the time. So when a fresh voice comes in, i.e. a guest artist, a pianist, clarinetist, whoever, it's exciting because they will come in with their own personality, which is immediately apparent, and they'll come in with their own sound. And we played, for example, with about half a dozen different clarinetists over the last few years. The same pieces. We've played the Brahms Clarinet Quintet with so many different players. And of course, the clarinet is an instrument where you could have tremendous variety. Just the instrument alone is different. German, French. We'll go on tour with Sabine Meyer, and we've had some collaborations here with very many different American bass players. And it's astonishing how different that music can sound from one player to another. And at the end, it's a good thing because you realize the music is so much greater than just one person's approach or your initial idea. And so I think it's one of the best things about our job. But do get to play with different people. We just played with Leon Fleischer recently, and there were some things that he said, not just in the performance, but in the rehearsal. And he's a very philosophical man, of course.
Yes, of
course. He'll open his mouth and gently suggest an idea, and often his very succinct sort of verbal articulation of an idea or of a concept will be so perfectly judged and so profound that you get a lot of mileage out of that, and you think, oh, well, he told us to wait at that fermata a little bit longer in this Mozart concerto. Of course, there are parallels in all the other Mozart pieces that we play. And you need to be reminded of those things sometimes. And in a quartet, you have to generate that inspiration between the 4 of you. And sometimes you run out of ideas, or somebody says, excuse me, would you mind not interrupting what I'm saying? I'll say, well, yeah, but I know what you're going to say.
Right.
100 million times.
Right. Well, and you develop a sound together. You know how something is going to sound because you've developed it over time. And probably when you bring in another collaborator, things might change immediately because everyone is responding in a different way, in a new way.
They do, and that's what's exciting. We played. Schumann we played a lot, and we're going to play it quite a lot this summer. And I can think of all the different ways in which the pianist might prepare for my second subject, the first movement, to the corner into that, and you play it. We play it so many times. You've got to do it twice,
exactly,
4 times, 6 times,
yes.
And everybody does it slightly differently.
Yeah.
And there's no one right way, and everybody shows their own individuality as a pianist or a guest artist, and it's fascinating. Or how you deal with going to the coda and the scherzo. Some people take time. Some people go crashing in. The tempo of the slow movement, is it a real funeral march? Is it slow, or is it more con moto? Do we emphasize the con moto more or less? All of those things. It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited. I think that we'll have an incredible time. Well, Clive, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I know that everyone is really, really excited to meet you all, and we just can't wait.
Thank you, Michelle. We're very much looking forward to being with you too.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. See you soon.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye.